I'm not really going to talk too much about technology this morning. Sorry, you're in the wrong session. But what I really want to talk much more about are the outcomes of that technology, particularly as they relate to people. We are a company that believes very strongly in innovation. And there are actually 4 levels of innovation that we believe exists. First of all, make it cheaper. Well, everyone strives for that, of course. Make it better, another great thing to do. The one we really like is creating new values. But there's an even better one than that. And that better one is enabling your customer to innovate. The iPad isn't a great tool because you can kind of sit and do your emails on it, because so many people have taken that and provided innovations. And so it's chastening to note that we started our world of innovation by innovating something great for our customers. We made tall buildings possible with some help from our friends, as we have heard, but we made tall buildings possible as an industry. But we did more than that, because if you have elevators driven, as Rick said at the beginning, by drivers, they need to see where everybody is when they come down. So all the elevators have to be in a certain place. That means all the hoistways are in the middle. You need structure. That's the core. And then once you've got the core, you've naturally got the ability to hang floor plates and then put an outer cladding. So what we did was not only bring tall buildings to the world, but to a certain extent, our industry set out the configuration of those tall buildings, which hasn't frankly changed that much in 100 years. And so that was our level 4 innovation. But to sort of great sadness to some of us, we kind of stopped. The building was in place, the configuration was in place, people knew what to do with it, and they built lots and lots of great buildings. So we sort of went from being an integral contributor down to sort of just being another contractor. Quite sad for us. And something that we tried to turn around in our office next to another mountain, a rather more natural one, in Ebikon, near Lucerne, in the 1980s. That coincided with the arrival of this young man, Dr. Paul Friedli, at Schindler. And his attitude, being both a PhD and a medical doctor, was it's really all about people, and that's where the innovation will be. And to set out our thinking, I want to change tack completely and talk about something that the more senior members of this audience will remember, the great days of flying, if that's what they were. And let's remember that, like most transportation systems, flying has 2 very specific elements. You have, of course, the people that manufacture the airplanes. And this is a certain skill. It's very long, code intensive, everything else. And then you have to think about how you can make progress. Well, a lot of progress has been made. If I look at an Airbus A350 now compared to 1958 to 707, much nicer seating, entertainment system, 2 pilots, much quieter, fuel efficient. But if I want to go from London to New York today, and the fundamental thing I'm worried about is the time it takes me to get from London to New York, there's really not been a lot of progress. Now let's look at the other side. Let's look at the airline that uses those airplanes. Well, this is where it helps to have a long memory. Do you remember, ladies and gentlemen, this? We need to go on a trip, so we go to our travel agent. And we spend about an hour going through all these books to try and figure out where on earth we're going to go and how it's all going to work together. Then the travel agent will write out for us a ticket. Yeah, me too. I remember all of this. And then, of course, we get to the airport and forget about taking anything onto the plane. There aren't any baggage holds worth the name, so we'll stand in line and we'll get something else. We call it a boarding pass, but we must remember that this flight coupon must be attached. Very important. And then, finally, we can get on the airplane. How does it work today? I get out my phone, I book my flight, I get myself a boarding pass, I take it to first security and then the gate. I get on my airplane, and I've got enough room to take 2 or 3 days worth of clothes with me for a business trip. So it's much simpler. So sometimes you have to recognize where the gains are to be made if you're going to innovate. So when Dr. Friedli came, he basically took a look at the elevator and decided that yes, Schindler makes great elevators, that's all a very good thing, and so now we'll move on. And we'll start trying to see how we can utilize those elevators much better than we were doing at that time. And this is a problem most people in the elevator industry will be very familiar with in this room, and this is the problem of destination control. In the 1980s, you just couldn't go any higher, because if you did, you'd need so many elevators to get the service, the cores would get so big, the financial viability of the building was gone. So we needed more efficient elevators. And since the 40s, it had been known if you pre-selected people ahead of time for your elevators, they would basically be able to get up the building much, much quicker, because now I make much fewer stops. These elevators are coming down much faster, and I'm going to get much better handling capacity. It was great in theory, and no one knew how to do it. And we at Schindler focused an enormous amount of attention on this. And in 1990, we came out of a system that works. It seems so familiar now. We had these things, we called them Z-line terminals. We distributed these around the elevator system. When we had one of our little red guys, all he had to do was put in the floor he wanted to go to, get sent to an elevator, in this case C. When the elevator came, there was a little bit of reassurance that, yes, you are going to the floor you want to go to. And that started the ball rolling again with tall buildings. And 10 years later, we had added a access control, a card reader. It also allowed us to know much more personal details about our customers so we could serve them better. So far, so good. But there was another thing we'd hit when we got to Schindler ID, which for a destination control system, the really clever people in our organization can explain, so I won't be trying to do it, that you can actually have an optimized system whereby for any amount of traffic in any group of building, you can't really do better than this. And so we recognized if we were going to go on bringing innovation to our customers, it wasn't just going to be through single control systems of single elevator groups. We had to do something else. And so what we did was to change the question. We didn't anymore ask us, what can we do with elevators? We said, what can we do in the whole building? How can we look at one person entering the building, traveling through it, sitting down in their office or hotel room or cafeteria, and optimize that journey, because that's the way we'll get the next step. And we called this science transit management. And since I am the only native English speaker in our group, our department made the decision to ask me to write the formal definition, a decision they regretted almost immediately, because I was brought up in England and that's the result. So we changed it a little bit. It's seamless building transit to delight our customers, and that's what we're trying to do, to have touch points everywhere in the building to guide people to find them the right elevator to get them through the building. And that started the ball rolling again. And to do this transit management, we produced this thing that we call port technology. And port technology we launched actually in this great city, not too far from here at the Marriott Marquis in Times Square 6 years ago. And now it's really all over the world, and it's been very successful. And in order to have port technology really have touch points everywhere, we've got a lot of different ports in apartments, apartment doors, apartment buildings, even on mailboxes and garages. So really, when you move through a high-end building, port is everywhere you need it to be and can help you and guide you and make your journey as seamless as possible. And we've recently launched an even cooler product, and we call that MyPort. And MyPort is taking that entire port system and synthesizing it down to a smartphone. So imagine, instead of going up to all these ports on the walls and finding them, you're taking everything you need in your pocket. And we love MyPort. And the reason we love it, it's available for everybody. You don't need to be in a landmark building to have port technology and transit management and all those benefits. We love MyPort. And I'd love to go on talking about it all day, but I don't want to make a product presentation here because I believe that we, today, you and I, the senior influencers of this industry, have more important matters to discuss. If you want to know more about MyPort, please come to the Schindler room, the VIP room we have, and we'll talk your socks off about it because we're very proud of it. But I want to talk about the broader ramifications, and it's come up once or twice today already. MyPort's been used all around the world, and we've suddenly started finding that architects are asking us really interesting questions that relate to this whole idea of the configuration that was set 100 years ago. And if you now have the ability to do urban mobility differently, doesn't that mean by extension you have the ability to do buildings differently? And it turns out we believe very strongly that you do. There are formal buildings. We know how to do those, and we're very successful. And because there's 7 billion people in the world, they need a lot of buildings, and we work hard on that. But there's also a lot of informal buildings in the world. Actually, 90% of the dwellings in the world have no architectural content. Can you imagine that? And since we do so well out of 7 billion people in the world, we cannot, in all morality, forget about the 1 billion people that can't afford our elevators or our buildings. And we decided we needed to bring them into the equation too. And what I want to talk to you today about is sort of the room in the middle. These are favelas. This is what these people live in. Can we make it better? And can we do it through the way that we construct things? Let's explain. We did a study in Venezuela. It was in Caracas. And it was a building which was called Torre David. Here's a picture of it. This building has 16 floors, 3,000 people, no elevators. How better to understand the social impact of verticality than by taking elevators out of the equation? And working with our friends at ETH, this is the school in Zurich, where Einstein went, and a few other famous people like our boss Paul Friedley. We studied these people. And what we found out was that these folks had moved into this half-finished building from the favelas. The building had stopped for financial reasons. It had dry ceilings, it had supporting platforms. There were 3,000 people living inside. They now had security because they could control the entrance. They now knew the building wasn't going to fall down because it had architectural content. They built lives in this building that were infinitely better than those lives they had before living in the favelas. And we made a book. It was actually the Architectural Book of the Year of the FT. We're very proud of this, with ETH, to explain all this. And it actually won the Golden Lion Award at the Venezia Biennale. But the critical thing it did was to start us thinking about the whole notion of a place between formal and informal architecture, and we called it formally informal, the urban shelf. Construct architecturally the foundations and the platforms. Give people security. Make sure that when a tsunami comes, a tsunami is not a catastrophe. What's the catastrophe is the 100,000 people living 1 centimetre above sea level in buildings that are going to fall flat. That's the catastrophe. Provide them with buildings that will not do that, that will give them security, and let it develop. If necessary, it develops in the same way as favelas, but an infinitely better lifestyle. And so we decided we needed to think about this. And we've done a lot of conceptual work. Hopefully it will be more relatively soon. And the notion here is that you do need a certain different type of urban mobility, but it really works. And what we would like to do is take areas like this, where social housing just can't be built because of funding and everything else, and put in spaces like this. And whether they're then formally developed or informally is very much a matter for individual countries. Then we figured out something else. If you do a structure like this, it actually does have a lot of application in the Western world. For example, we're always hearing how much green space we need to add to our cities. We're doing a lot of work with Hong Kong at the moment. They are desperate to get more green space into that environment, even though it's a successful environment. This can fit into basically any urban shape, and it can provide the green space. And then we realized that there was another problem this approach solves, which is much closer to the interests of this group, which is why I bring it up today, which is it provides the glue, the neighborhoods between these fine tall buildings. I mean, how many cities, we know where they are, have put up 5 or 6 incredible towers, and they're totally isolated. There's roadways between them or just blank space between them. This type of approach gives us an opportunity not just to add neighborhoods, but also to add green space. And we think this is a phenomenal opportunity for the Western urban development as well. And you really can generate very, very nice spaces using this approach. Here's a variant of the approach, which is slightly more structured. It's the urban shelf approach, but here we have buildings with very secure entrances, with a very small footprint. But when we get up to the top, we can see that what we've been able to do is to add parkland where our children and our children's children can play all day in total safety. And it's things like this that I believe we can now make happen in our cities. And what it all really comes down to is urban mobility. We've had this extremely structured model that we have presented to the architectural community. We're the elevator people, we make your buildings work, you do it this way. Well, we're saying no, don't. We've got enough technology now to make your buildings work. We are saying to architects and developers, really think very freely now about the buildings you make, and we will provide vertical transportation that works within them. We love tall buildings. We are an elevator company. But we also love those tall buildings stitching together and finding their whole sense of community and place in a country or a city. This, to us, is really what it's about. We are saying to you now, go do wonderful things and we will support you. Don't listen to people who say, no, it won't work because the elevators won't work. We'll make it work. Over to you. Thank you very much.